Good morning, everybody, and I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to everybody this morning. Welcome to Girton, welcome back to Girton for all of the Girtonians in the audience on this very special day in which we're saying thank you for the tremendous support that everyone's given during the great campaign. I have a couple of formalities to get through. In terms of health and safety, so I'll go through this very quickly. I can assure you there is no planned fire drill today. However, should an alarm ring, please leave through the exits and assemble by the tower in front of the college. There are two clearly marked fire exits. I feel like I'm on a plane here, but anyway, the nearest toilets are next to the social hub or in the main entrance. Good, okay, that's that done. My name is James Anderson, or calls me Jimmy Anderson. I'm the bursar of the college, a role I started back in January 2020, so it's been an interesting couple of years. And I spent about 20 years, just over 20 years prior to coming to Girton, working in various investment banks and advisory firms, largely helping companies raise money on the London Stock Exchange and deal with their shareholders when they listed. As bursar, and while we're just on the subject of a great campaign, I should add a particular personal note of thanks. I've inherited a college balance sheet which is as strong as it's ever been in the history of the college, and that is, to a very large extent, down to the generosity of our supporters, our alumni and other supporters, and really that generosity has been transformational as we look forward to an equally pioneering future for the college. So, to our session today, I'm thrilled to be chairing this panel on entrepreneurship and innovation, and to be in the company of three highly successful Girtonian entrepreneurs. I should add, by the way, this is a very un-Girtonian panel in its balance of sexes, in the sense that it's all male. It didn't start out this way. There have been a few changes, and COVID has had its role to play as well. We're not sending any particular message, just let me leave it at that. To my left is Rob Durkin, who is a serial entrepreneur in e-commerce software and digital marketing, who sold his first e-commerce software business to WPP 7 years, I think, after graduating. At the end of the table we have Amar, Radia, who has co-founded businesses which make our technology devices more human, which keep our eyes healthy, and whose Dishoom restaurants have given us a portal into the old Irani cafes of Bombay, with their vibrant cuisine, and including introducing the UK to the bacon naan, which is a considerable contribution. And to my right, Sabesan Sithamparanathan, who has built an astonishing track record of developing and monetizing technology here in Cambridge, focused in the Internet of Things, and most notably his business Pervase ID, which is now a global multi-million-dollar enterprise with a growing number of blue-chip investors. So that's our panel. I'm in the sort of Evan Davis seat, and I will try and say as little as possible that our panellists, and most importantly you, have the floor. I'm conscious I've done very little justice to my panellists in introducing them, so I wonder if, as a start, we might get each of them to talk a little bit about their journey from Girton into the world of business and entrepreneurship. So maybe if I start with Sabesan to my right, and we can work down the table.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Jamie, for your very kind introduction. So my name is Sabesan. I came to the United Kingdom when I was 18 years old, after completing my A-level in Sri Lanka. When I came here, completely new to the culture, completely new to the weather, completely new to everything, as you could imagine. I did an undergrad at Sheffield, came here to Cambridge University for a postgrad, PhD at Corpus Christi College. During my 3-year PhD, I was lucky enough to invent this completely using battery-free electronic tracking for assets. So you could track medical devices in a hospital, you could track patients in a hospital, You could write clothing item in a retail shop, you could track tools in a plate manufacturing factories. And that was my PhD, and I was lucky enough to invent that, and thanks to the university environment, if I didn't have that sort of Cambridge University research environment, I would have invented one of those things when I was a student. When you invent things, you feel like you got a baby. When you got a baby, you then want to take the baby from your laboratory to the real world. So that passion gave me a way to take the technology from lab to the market. So turn the Sabesan into a Cambridge University spin-out in 2011. At the same time, I was lucky enough to be elected to a Tucker Prize Research Fellow at Girton College at the same time. So I had 5 years of trying to see if I could take this technology to really turn into a prototype, into a product during that 5-year time. I've also invented further patents. One of the patents also tied to Girton College, so if that makes any money, the percentage of that will come to Girton College as well. And that's the model the university plays in the university, that X% always go back to the university, and then if you associate with the college, go to college as well as the department as well. So hopefully, one day, Jamie, you hope to see some money in the bank account of Girton College. Fingers crossed. So since completing my enterprise fellowship, I then left the Girton College to really start hiring employees and to really build this business into a big way, because if I'm still in the university, if I'm still researching, if I'm still lecturing, having fun, you're never going to be successful as a multi-billion entrepreneur. So I needed to make that harder decision to leave Girton College in 2016 to really focus on entrepreneurship, which is what I did. And over the last 6 years, I'm pleased to say we raised over 10 million investment in several rounds, seed round, Series A, Series B, with a multiple blue chip entrepreneur corporation, as Jamie said, which includes Stanley Black & Decker as one of our investors and another big blue chip retailers in the world. And our customers include people like Marks and Spencer's, people like H&M, people like Zara, those people you would buy clothing items to. Hospitals, including Adam Brooks, Hearts and Consumers Hospitals, and older age children hospitals where we are tracking medical devices and so on and so forth, to all the way to plate manufacturers like Airbus, Boeing, and Lockheed Martin. So today we're trying to scale the business to 10 million revenue. That's the plan for the next 3 years, and I'm pleased to be here today to really share my views and thoughts for your questions you might have. Thank you. Thanks for the listening.
Thank you, Sabesan. Maybe I'll turn it over to Rob to tell us about his story.
Thank you, Jimmy. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all here at college, and nice to be back, actually, I think, for all of us. I'm Rob Durkin, as Jimmy mentioned. I'm still very heavily involved with college. It's not all that long since I was here as an undergraduate, so I'm 36 now. I should have hesitated really before I told everybody that, shouldn't I? So I matriculated in 2004 and graduated in 2007 from computer science. Actually, spot one familiar face straight away. Karen, my tutor, sat there, who I met on my first day here at college. Thank you for everything you did supporting me through my time here. But what I did was I studied computer science for 3 years, and actually, similar to you, Sabesan, I began developing the technology that we ultimately commercialised whilst I was here at university as an undergrad. My final dissertation was called Generic Price Comparison in an Online Marketplace. I can't believe I still remember it so really, but I do. And it never made its way into the library of the computer science lab because I had to make special arrangements, have it withheld. So we were filing at the time for patents to commercialise the software. So pretty much straight after finishing here, I had this technology for doing price comparison, which at that time was in its infancy really. So we took that to the market. I always say we because I ended up having another couple of business partners along the journey, one of whom was a Girtonian who I also met here, and another one who, by coincidence, our only external investor was also a Girtonian. So very strong Girton influence in the business. So we developed that technology, and basically we were able to automatically create price comparison listings for retailers online, and it generated significant incremental sales for them. So when we first went to Marks and Spencer, to one of our early clients as well, they weren't really selling. They weren't really selling online. They'd only just started selling online, and they weren't selling through other channels like price comparison websites. And we had a service where we were able to list them very rapidly. So it took off. We were very fortunate. We ended up with about 80 out of the top 100 UK retailers on the platform within probably the first 12 months. And I was relatively young man in London suddenly earning a fairly exciting amount of money, particularly for a Yorkshireman who's normally scared of spending it. So that was my experience. We grew the business then quite rapidly. Our biggest clients became, we actually had a slightly different product, which I won't bore you with all the details yet. Our biggest clients became Microsoft and Nestle, so ended up working globally for Nestle, delivering e-commerce solutions for them in every market for every brand across the world, which, as you can imagine, there's thousands of kind of brands just within the Nestle group. So that became a really massive opportunity. And at that point, WPP started to become interested, primarily because we were stealing business from them. I got a call to my desk phone, and they sort of said, I think they might have looked at our accounts and realised they'd lost more in revenue from the projects we were doing than it would probably have cost them to buy us at the time. But I realised that myself, so we didn't sell straight away, we kind of flirted with them for a few years. And when I was 27, we exited. I sold the business to Martin Sorrell, stayed there for a few years in senior roles at WPP, which was a great experience for me, and long enough to realise that I probably shouldn't work for anybody else ever. And during that time, to keep myself sane, I invested in a number of other businesses. So I bought and sold one or two others since then, and particularly done a lot of investing into early stage companies, so what we call angel investing into other young entrepreneurs actually. So we've had a few successes putting money into other young entrepreneurs and helping them grow their businesses. So in a short as I probably could make it, that's a summary of my background. Lovely to be here.
Thanks very much, Rob. And just to hand over then to Amar to give us a sense of his story.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to be here, and thanks for listening. So I'm actually going to go back about 100 years, and you'll sort of see the scene sort of coming through this. But a little bit of highlights. So I read maths here from 91 to 94 before I went on to work in the city and before I started all the businesses. But I feel that my story actually began with my grandfather, who actually left India as a stowaway on a ship on his way to East Africa. So my great-grandfather passed away at a very young age. Typical Indian fashion, my great-grand-uncles confiscated all his land and property, and so they were kicked out. He then managed to save a little bit of money, boarded a ship, realized he didn't have enough money for the ticket all the way down to East Africa. Was a stowaway, presented himself halfway, and basically worked for the rest of the journey back to East Africa. When he landed there, in those days he got married young, so he's married sort of late teenager. He had 15 children. So my father was one of 15, 7 brothers, 8 sisters. And all 7 brothers, so my father and all his the 6 brothers, they're all entrepreneurs. So if we sort of go back to it, I think it was pretty much in my DNA. I didn't think I had much of a choice now. Lucky for my mother, it was just 2 of us, not 15. So myself and my younger brother, I came up to Cambridge. I read maths here. I actually came up at the age of 17, up in Kenya. I read maths, and then I went on to work at EY, or Ernst & Young back in the day. I spent 8-9 years there. I did everything from corporate finance to audit to personal tax and all the rest of it. My brother was a fund manager in Merrill Lynch, and just before my sort of 29th, 30th birthday, we sort of left, and ever since then I've been growing and scaling businesses. I have a very special place in my heart for Girton, and this is something I just shared with Jimmy, and I'm not sure I've shared with the rest of the guys here. But while I was here in my second year, I fell ill, and I was up at Addenbrooke's, and a couple of weeks of tests later, they came forward and said, you've got an autoimmune disease, which is a sort of a kidney disease that I've had at that stage. I was given I was quoted a life expectancy of 8 years at that point in time. I'm now 27 years on, having studied everything that I need to do, obviously became my own doctor and stuff, and built up, I guess, an inner resilience that I was going to just not allow this to stop me. So I get asked a lot of questions around, you've done everything from restaurants, and obviously the famous Big on Roll, which I enjoy. It's one of my favorites as well, all the way to, we've got a tech accessories brand, to More recently, I've co-founded a business with 3 professors and ophthalmic surgeons at Moorfields, which is around eye care, where we're working with a Swiss pharmaceutical company in partnership. And I think if I hadn't had the support at Girton in my second and third year, that sort of pushed me through, and I hadn't gone to, obviously, move to London, and I've now been dialyzing for 27 years. If I hadn't had that foundation over here, I wouldn't have the strength to basically go on and do everything that I did. It's interesting, I was speaking to my wife this morning, who's sadly not here. We've got a big sort of family birthday we've got to go back for. And she was asking if I could go back in time, would I actually, if I could change anything, would I change anything? And it took me a little bit, it took me a couple of minutes just to think about it. And my answer to her was actually no. And it sounds quite, well, a little bit corny, but if there was any chance that I didn't have my 2 lovely young daughters, or had the sort of the life that I'd had with them and my wife, I could not risk that, so I wouldn't change it. Anyway, so that's my background.
Well, Jimmy, I know you gave a very brief introduction, but I'd be interested in hearing more personally about your career prior to Bursa, which we obviously know is going to be the highlight of your career. But I think it's probably worth filling everybody in on a little bit of what you did professionally as well, because it probably colours the conversation later. Is that all right?
That's fine, Rob. And yes, I mean, without doubt, Bursa of Girton is the highlight. And honestly, I can say that the mission of Girton is in widening access to Cambridge is a very good motivation to get out of bed every day and come to work. It's an extraordinary place. My background, as I said, has been in finance, but I would say in larger businesses and established businesses, and I'm going to ask the panel a question about that in a minute. But so, having read classics to my degree, and then of course went into finance because that's the way these things work. So I started my career at J. Henry Schroeder when that was still an investment bank. In fact, my first job was as an analyst covering the chemicals sector and writing buy and sell and hold notes to investors on chemicals companies. Having done my degree in classics, so I spent a lot of time trying to sort of learn what on earth I was writing about. But anyway, it seemed to go okay. And then I moved over to advising businesses much more broadly than the world of the British chemical sector, which really disappeared and got taken over, and so I probably got out of that bit of it at the right time. I have worked with and had the privilege of advising very broad range of businesses across sectors. So I was involved in the flotation of William Hill, the bookie. I've done work for National Power, for mining companies, and for sometimes broker to Arm Holdings, of course a great local success story here. Part of that's been about raising money in the stock market. Part of it is, if you are listed, how will the market react if we do this takeover or that transaction? How do we get our stock more highly valued? What do we need to articulate more? So, and it's a fascinating role. And actually, few things are more interesting than taking sort of small or medium-sized entrepreneur-led businesses to the stock market, helping entrepreneurs tell their story, helping build trust with the large investment firms, so the Schroders and the BlackRocks and the Fidelities, as to how well founded is your business plan? Are you actually going to deliver profits when you say you will? What's the evidence? And so I spent a lot of my time working with companies to sort of really build that story and to help entrepreneurs tell their story to investors who are rightly a tough crowd, and who kick the tires very hard. So that's a brief insight into my life before Girton and before bursary. But I wanted to pick up on a couple of elements from my own experience and throw things back to the panel. So my first is that I've been fortunate to work for some amazing and extremely high-quality big businesses. There are those of us whose risk aversion leads us to work for big businesses, and in fact there's a degree of safety in that, and there are those who go it alone. And I'm interested, we've heard a bit of their stories already, but I'm interested in, what is it that made you or makes an entrepreneur go it alone and sort of forsake the world of, a safe corporate world for, being your own boss and, managing all your own risk. I mean, I don't know who wants to take that one up. Rob, I don't know.
Yeah, I might pass this one. I'll give you a short answer and possibly come back to me later. I had a slightly different experience because I did it straight away. And I think I'm seeing more and more of my friends now are actually starting their own businesses and taking those risks. Actually, for me, it was easier because I had absolutely nothing to lose. As a student graduating straight out of the doors here, it wasn't a major decision. What was really tricky was putting together the initial funding. Not from a particularly wealthy background or anything like that. So literally we walked into a bank, all the banks at the time, and asked them if we could borrow 25 grand to start the business. Most of them laughed at us and showed us the door, but for some reason, I think they must have just been having a bad day. The chap at NatWest said yes, and without that money, I think I would have done exactly what you said, I've gone and got a job somewhere more sensible, but fortunately, there's a bit of luck involved and it worked out. Never actually really took any external finance after that, so I mentioned our only other external investor was a chap called Rufus Everson, who was a Girtonian, and I knew him through that. I think he put 5 grand into the business actually, and ended up getting a very handsome return when we went back to Sorrel paid us. So for me it wasn't a major decision. I think I did it at the right time when the risk wasn't huge and it worked out for me. But you may have a completely different answer.
Yeah, I think it was just kind of to Rob before he kicked off. I think as much as I love my wife, we are absolutely polar opposites when it comes to risk. She would clearly define me as risk-seeking, whereas she's very much sort of risk-averse. Coming back to the question, so the more recent business that we've launched, it's called MTHK, that's gone down the more sort of, I would call it the structured route. So I put in the pre-seed, obviously, of when we sold Treehouse, and we had a liquidity event, and we brought on board some investors, so a couple of angel investors, VCs, a couple of family offices. So that's going to go down the traditional route, and we'll have seed, Series A, and all the rest of it. Back in the day, I actually didn't know about any of this sort of stuff. So if I go back to Schumann and squirming a little bit in my seat now that I talk about it, we had a 1-year-old at home, and I basically double mortgaged our apartment. I did double misses. And what they call it blind, naive optimism, I just assumed it would work. I decided to ignore the fact that 90% of all the restaurants fell within the first 2 years of launch. And we just put in the hard graft. And in fact, one of the stories I wanted to share with the guys was we launched and doing ridiculous hours. So I had an old Vespa, which I sort of scooted down into sort of a couple of gardens in Martins Lane. I looked at the site. We had most of our chefs were from India, from these bars in our very group. And so I would receive the vegetables. And the reason I would be there at 5 a.m. to receive the vegetables was because the vegetable delivery guys obviously would try and pull a fast one on our chefs. Deliver all these vegetables and stuff. You have all these beautiful tomatoes on top and everything wrong. So I would literally be there at 5:50 in the morning going through all the tomatoes and sending back the boxes that I didn't like and stuff. Spent the full day there, did service with the team, all that sort of stuff. I'd sneak in a little nap at, I'm not sure I'm allowed to mention this, but it was a threat around the corner, I had a little quiet seat. And you understand why, because then I did the evening service as well, and then catch up around midnight, and I'll take the Vespa, which was definitely on its last legs by then, back home. And Benita, my missus was, obviously been with our young one, Ariana, the whole day, was obviously been feeding and stuff, and I wanted to obviously spend time with her, so then I'd do the 1 a.m. feed with her. And she would walk in around 1:30 and would be in this rocking chair. And I'd be asleep, and Ariana would be asleep on my shoulders and stuff. So she'd gently pick her up, put her on her cot, and then quietly pull me to the other room, give me a big telling off. And I'd had my 3 hours sleep, and I'd go back Anyway, sorry, but my funding was double mortgage, which I would definitely not recommend again.
So when you invent things when you're a student at the Cambridge University, you get two options. One, you could take a risk of spinning up the business and hope for you can turn that business into a $1 million, billion dollar, become a millionaire or billionaire. The other part is become a professor. When you have a research fellowship, you build your career up and you become a professor. Both are wonderful, respectable jobs. And being a professor at Cambridge University is much easier job because, you know, teach and enjoy life. I'm not saying that's what all the professors at Cambridge do, but it's an enjoyable journey and a very respectable job. And let's risk that, whereby being an entrepreneur taking on that CEO journey is a very high risk because you may not even get any single penny out of this business. So often when students or professors invent things, which happen many times in Cambridge University, as you would imagine, often the typical path, we would license the technology to other blue chip corporations. So I had to think through, not overnight, to make these life-changing decisions, to really think through over months and months and months. Do I really want to be a professor one day and have a respectful life in Cambridge University at Girton College, or do I want to really take the risk? Maybe I'm gambling here, maybe I become a billionaire, or maybe I become a poorest person on the planet. Having done some thorough MBA project, the good thing about Cambridge University is allows you to, when you are an inventor, you get all sort of treatment. You then get to supervise students at MBA and get business school, where you can thoroughly test your idea, you can thoroughly test your product. Are the customers going to pay your product? Are there any unique selling points for your product? When you really establish yourself using MBA student at Cambridge Business School, I then realized, actually, this product I invented, which is, as I said earlier, is my baby, truly have a unique point in this planet. I better take my baby from the laboratory to the real world. Having go through the process, I then decided to go with the latter of taking the risk and freeze which I have done today. So that's the risk I covered. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sabesan. I mean, some interesting points coming out from the panel in terms of financing and those early stages. I know that you, Sabesan, have been through several sort of funding rounds. I just wondered if you had any sort of golden rules in terms of accessing finance. What would be your sort of do's and don'ts for budding entrepreneurs as they think about perhaps control of their business, the cost of finance? Any sort of thoughts on that?
It's a very important question. Actually, that could make you make or break for the business. And in Cambridge University, we tend to have a model where we're trying to do organic funding growth as much as you can until you ensure there's a real product you really got to be able to sell to the market. Because if you take investment very early on, which is what many startups have done in Cambridge, and if you actually look at the numbers in Cambridge University, 80% of the startups from Cambridge University fails before they even make the 1 million revenue. 80% of the startups from Cambridge University fails before even they make the 1 million revenue market. That's simply for many reasons, because we're simply very good at inventing, which is why Cambridge is not so really good, right? We are inventors, which is why we are good in pretty much. We are really good at inventing. What we really struggle at in the UK and in Cambridge in particular, how do you really take that invention to really exploit that invention into the real society, in the real world, such that the people are going to pay for the product, pay for that invention? We are not really good at it. If you look at the Silicon Valley, for example, in the US, they are much more better in the other way around. They are not really as good as us when you're inventing things, but actually when you come to marketing, strategic, and the right funding model, they are superior than us. So the lesson we learn, I learned again the hard way, because obviously my background is invented, is that trying to not to take investment early on. So we were lucky enough from Cambridge University, Cambridge Enterprise, which allows you to really take the technology from to sort of product stage using seed investment. So that really helped, because Cambridge Enterprise, like a friendly investor, doesn't really kick you out if you don't do a really good job. You're out of the business. Like once happened to Apple founder Steve Jobs, if some of you know. So we were lucky enough with that Cambridge Enterprise model. It allows you to really get the product into the market. Once you go to that stage, you then truly got a product, and you've got a customers who are going to pay for the product. And that is the point. You then try to take Series A and Series B. Even with the Series A and Series B, do not take the money from everyone. This is like a marriage. If you get the wrong partner, you're going to be out of business soon. You're going to be kicked out of your own business very soon. So getting carefully, really reaching out to as many investors as possible. There are hundreds and thousands of investors worldwide, not just in the UK. People who want to invest from the US and etc. One of my investors, Stanley Black & Decker from the US. The reason we gone down that road compared to the traditional way of taking investment from VC is that VC gives you a lot of money, which is exciting, which is what you want. But when you have a corporate investor, they also bring customers. They also bring customers. To my point earlier, it's not just about now product inventions. Now you need to get customers. Now you get market traction. So if you truly get the right strategic corporate investor, they could truly help you addressing that barrier, addressing the challenge every startups and spin-out face in Cambridge. So a single advice I'll give to my fellow entrepreneurs and spin-out company around Cambridge is to try to get the right strategic investors and balance it with the VC and seed investors such that you got the right balance for you so that you can be successful using the invention, because all the inventions are amazing. It's now how do you really make them exploited using the right investors to the marketplace. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other sort of war stories in terms of investors working with outside investors?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of the crux of a lot of the business stuff. My experience, I've got probably a couple of don'ts actually, but hopefully I do. My experience was a bit different because we sort of, as I said, self-financed the first business, but a number of the other businesses I've been involved in, we've done VC and raised funds in various different ways. So one do would be look to angel investors. So people like me who have actually done businesses, have had their own business and are prepared to get their hands dirty, you know, that they bring a lot more to the table than just cash. So at the moment, I think a lot of really early stage, seed stage companies, that they raise 150k, that's the set amount, under SEIS we call it, which is a government tax scheme for anyone who doesn't know. It's very attractive to the investor. You kind of get, it costs you half of what you put in really actually in tax relief. So there's a fairly kind of standard route now. If you're starting a business, you raise 150k of seed capital and you do your absolute best to get the best people, angel investors I would say, to invest. And it becomes, it's actually quite competitive because I've sat on the other side of the table as an angel investor a lot. And it's a bit like, I hate the programme, I never watched Dragon's Den. I shouldn't say that because Margaret's not here, is she? sorry Margaret, I very much love Margaret many times at college, but I don't really watch the programme. But it's that type of thing in the angel environment, and it becomes an audition process. So actually, the companies are quite selective over whose money they will take. So that's an anecdote around really early stage funding. Some of the other businesses where we've raised money slightly later, and my kind of don't story would be you've got to be really cautious about the VCs. They, they can be quite aggressive. So one horror story, and maybe the mistake I made was investing in an Oxford graduate, but a young entrepreneur. Young entrepreneur.
That cannot be true.
Absolutely true. A young entrepreneur straight out of Oxford University, a men's shaving business. So many of you have seen Harry's. You know Harry's. It wasn't Harry's. he created a UK business called Cornerstone, which was basically the first people to offer and it was a clone really of the Harry's business in the UK. And he was a bright young enthusiast. I was the first investor other than his granddad. I think I put 25 grand in, having met him for 10 minutes over a beer or something. And he was a great guy, despite being from Oxford. He was a great guy, and he got on really well with the business. The whole plan was really engineer the thing so that Harry's would buy him at the end, or after not very long. So they came into the UK, they approached us, and they offered us about, I think it was a decent low tens of millions amount to sell the company, but he just completed a round with VCs prior to that. And you guessed, as I said, so that can be a real problem because they would be getting very little return at that level. But we had a lovely lunch together, myself and the Oxford lad, and I was pushing for it. I was the first guy in, so we'd have been getting a huge return. His life would have been possibly quite different, but really the deal was blocked by the VCs that came in really late. So that's a possible don't, I suppose.
Yeah. So. I think great points here. I think the one small bit that I'd add, just from my experience, just with the businesses, you've heard this phrase product market fit. So what I tend to do with all the businesses that we have right now is bootstrap as much as you can. In the early stages, lots of experimentation, understanding who your market is, what your customer wants, what is your product, what's the message you're getting across, what's your brand, how does it sit, how does it resonate. Doing all the work behind that before basically writing out the big checks or bringing in the big checks. One of the businesses that I've invested in, raised a lot of money, beautiful brand, all that sort of stuff, had a great hypothesis when they launched. This is the target customer, this is the target product, this is the market, all that, and poured in a huge amount of money in product development, marketing, all the rest of that, but they hadn't found the fit, and the business in the end actually failed, right? Yeah. And the story, and it was, for someone who was like an early investor, I mean, it was one of my first, but obviously big lessons, painful lessons, that actually, the bootstrapping bit is actually the most important. That's why we're there.
I'm conscious for about 20 minutes, and I've got a load more questions, but I would like very much to throw it open to the floor. I'm sure there's been a few things raised that people want to. If you've got a question already, and everyone is roving with the mic.
Yes, just so we can hear you.
Hello, I'm Andrew. My question is about government and EU-supported research programs and their involvement and influence on entrepreneurship. I've been involved on the sidelines of one, but I've observed a lot and come across a lot. And the thing that has worried me about them, and I'd be interested as to whether you think this exists and could be improved, is that billions and billions of pounds are ploughed into, by governments, what is supposedly great for the world projects, which usually involve a Greek university, a Finnish university, a British company, sort of everybody's got to come from all over the place, different things. It's 3 or 4 years, and there's at the end of it, people produce papers, and nothing is ever seen anymore of it, apart from that various people milked it along the way to pay for things that were just keeping their businesses going. But I'm shocked at the lack of actual entrepreneurial innovation that ends up at the end of projects. I don't know whether you've come across that yourselves, and does it exist for you, and is there a lesson for how we could actually turn these billions that goes into things like Horizon in the EU into true businesses, which don't happen, to my way of seeing it.
Great, so just to summarise then, the question is around government and EU support for entrepreneurship and a degree of scepticism as to whether these are actually delivering true value through entrepreneurship, or whether in fact actually it's just propping businesses up or really delivering not very much. I just wondered if there's any views of our panellists on that.
Yeah, sure. Let's start with the positive notes on the government's investment. So this, what we call Innovate UK, it used to be known as TSP, Technology Strategy Board. They do a really good job from the government, funded by the government, billions of pounds of money being focused on early stage businesses, SMEs, small, medium-sized businesses, and including the large business as well, because the innovation capital not in small startups, all the way to the big corporations. I have taken more than £1 million from that Innovate UK funding to really build that business organically early on. If we did not have that sort of Innovate UK millions pounds of investment from them, in return they get zero equity, they don't take any equity, but they really help us to really build that ideas which we develop part of the PhD, part of the research, into a demonstrator, into a prototype, into a product. Because PhD is all about still early days, right? When we are a student, we really start putting together into a lab demonstrator, which is what we do as engineers and as scientists. But you then need to really turn, that works in the laboratory, but things work in the laboratory to make it work in the real world, in a hospital, in a retail shop, in a manufacturing side, with a lot of development, a lot of prototyping, alpha, beta prototyping, and a lot of investment. And having Innovate UK government, funded by government, is really been one of the great vehicles in the UK, really supported, and I know many spin-out do make use of that. Having said that, it's very, very competitive. Obviously, there are thousands of spin-out worldwide, there are thousands of SMEs in the UK, and they cannot give money to everyone. So we were lucky enough to get one of those, many of those clients. But the question is, how do we then, as to your point, how do you then spend more money on this UK body so that they could hand out more money to these sort of corporations, as opposed to spending a lot of money to EPSRC and Research Council and so on and so forth, which in turn produce thousands of research papers, which is equally important, because if you don't produce paper, Cambridge University is not going to be the number one in the world, because we all going to be assessed, not only on inventing things in spin out, but also you get assessed by your publication, you're publishing in a high respected journals and so on and so forth, which we have to do part of this academic exercise. That's unfortunately how the world is worked. But I think you also very importantly pointed out, how do we really make this research truly be exploitable? Because currently most of the research, 99% of the research funded by the government in the UK will be just full of publication. Papers are, including my papers also published, papers after papers. With only typically 1% truly get exploited and turn into spin out, and out of the 1% is only X% truly become successful. The remaining is unfortunately unsuccessful. So I think you're absolutely right. The government, I was actually in a panel a couple of weeks ago. They are looking from entrepreneurs like us from Cambridge and Oxford to hear out how they could truly help to exploit these science-funded projects to really make a science-driven economy in the UK. Because economy is growing, but how do you really make, like the US have done really well, Silicon Valley-driven economy is completely different to the UK science-driven economy. We haven't got many Apples, we haven't got many Microsoft, we haven't got many Googles in the UK. How do we really build that Silicon Valley model and do that? And I was lucky enough to one of the panels a couple of weeks ago, part of the government. So, although government is doing okay job, but I think you're absolutely right, the government could do much better job learning from the other countries which have done really well of commercializing these funded projects to really make a break into this. Coming back to EU, I think the Horizons has been a great program from an EU point of view. But I think, again, there's a setback that now we are no longer part of EU. That means we are not allowed to apply for some of the grants, which is unfortunate. But hey, we could live in that world and see if we can really leverage from the US and other models we have to really scale based on this research we do. And we need to build this entrepreneurship culture. Not just doing this funded project, but how do you really build this entrepreneurship culture? Because current culture is about publishing papers after papers in your PhD. That's just the culture. If you have 5 papers, you're going to be a research fellow. That's how I applied for Girton College, and that's how I got selected as a research fellow, simply because I had papers after papers. It was an invention. So we got to put that into our society, into our community in Cambridge and worldwide, to really giving more emphasis to innovation, more emphasis to invention, and create that entrepreneurship culture is the only way to truly change the UK. Thank you.
Just quickly to add to that, so a very practical experience from my side. I know you mentioned Innovate UK. I would say it's quite good actually. It's I've seen both sides of it. I've been involved with companies. I've got one at the moment who've successfully secured funding from Innovate UK. I think one of the good things is it's hard to do. It's very competitive and they are very selective. So as a taxpayer, which I suppose we all are, maybe it's part of the question, I think we get quite good value from money there. I think it's very wisely spent. The frustrating side of that is actually I've done several applications for other companies and you think probably we deserved the funding but we didn't get it, and where else do you go? So that's just my kind of practical reflection. The other just funding related things are R&D tax credits. That's a kind of, I've seen some very dodgy stuff being done with R&D tax credits. I'm not sure as a taxpayer I get brilliant value for money from that. It's just something everyone does and you all know how to fill out the forms, and I'm not sure it's, yeah. So say no more.
So I think just adding to that, I think, just to come back to your question, I think there's an entire industry that's built around gaming the system, you know, with this R&D tax credits and all that. I think I don't have much to add to this, but I think the one thing that I would add is, like with entrepreneurial ventures and stuff, I think if we're not trying, so like for every 10 or 100 different ventures that go out, a success rate of 1 to 2% is basically what we would expect to come out of that. And if we didn't have that in our culture and stuff, you wouldn't have that 1 or 2%.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions for our panel? Yes.
You haven't attempted to define entrepreneurship. You've talked about risk, and I can understand that, having set up and run my own company. Any company running involves risk. Can a big company like M&S, for instance, be entrepreneurial? Because the board of directors is never going to be able to take that level of risk, it seems to me. You talk about doubling your mortgage. Yeah, I understand that. Personal failure, yes, I understand that. Entrepreneurship, it would help, can a big company actually be entrepreneurial? I don't know.
So the question is, what is entrepreneurship and can a big company be entrepreneurial? Rob, you have.
I'm quite passionate about this. Great question. Thank you. So I'll jump straight to the kind of big company, be entrepreneurial, because I think it is hard to define what entrepreneurs are, but we can come back to that. The Nestle relationship that I mentioned. So you mentioned the board. We had a product. We were doing something quite new and innovative using this price comparison technology we had, and I went into Nestle early doors as a potential supplier, and vetted alongside hundreds of other suppliers. We managed to get a small contract with them. And then from there, we built a very lucrative relationship with them as an innovation partner. So basically, once they'd seen we could solve one technology problem for them, and the reason we were able to do that in a really nice, I didn't even realise how low cost way, and that's why they partnered with us to do loads of other projects. And by the end of it, we were delivering new technology, on 3 monthly cycles for them that was revolutionising their global e-commerce strategy. And by the end of it, we were accountable for hundreds of millions of dollars in sales. So what I took away from that, and I was trying to encourage other companies to think the same way, is that some of the big companies will buy into startups, so they like working with other early stage companies. We might have thought we could never get a contract with Nestle, but the reason we were able was because they wanted to bring a little bit of that magic and entrepreneurial culture into their company, and that's why when I walked in there as like a 25-year-old guy with a team of probably 50 people at the time or something, they bought from us anyway, and we turned into a really valuable supplier for them. They were one of the bidders as well to buy the company when we came to exit. So I think that's one way that larger companies do participate and that they're keen to leverage the thing. I've seen a lot of that recently, like a lot of suppliers or early stage tech businesses. They have more capacity than we think to get into large companies as suppliers because they want to buy from entrepreneurs. So that's one answer to your question. What is an entrepreneur? Not 100% sure. The definition I think on the wiki or whatever would be undertaker of risk. And I like the use of the word undertaker as well. but yeah, I think it is about risk, and that's what I think I would carry from that angle. So have you guys got anything to say?
It's a small point to add to that actually. So I advised a large corporate a little while ago this. So I think the phrase that it used internally with large corporates, I think the sort of corporate mindset doesn't lend itself to sort of the entrepreneurial mindset where you sort of risk taking or ability to sort of scale or experimenting. So I think it might have been Google that first started this with sort of skunk works. It's a sort of American phrase where you have a segmented team and a unit that's dedicated off-site, maybe one of the main buildings and stuff that have a separate budget, a separate sort of reporting line and all that sort of stuff. Which then allow, and then you sort of hire in the people, or you have a team in there that are not your traditional sort of corporate sort of people and stuff. But that sort of environment has worked quite well. It doesn't always work, but the key factors that allow that to work is sort of segregation of that unit, as well as reporting lines, and just having a separate set of values and sort of performance criteria that they follow.
I'll be very quick. So entrepreneurship is basically when you have innovations, turn that innovation into a product or service, make a change to the society. So that journey is an entrepreneurship journey. Now, promoting entrepreneurship in big corporations is not easy, simply because when you invent things when you are an employee, the big corporation own it. You don't even get paid right sometimes. Yeah. So is it much easier to promote entrepreneurship in university, in research organizations, places like that, which is what we do in the UK and places like this, but very difficult to promote that in big corporations, so to put it in simple.
Yeah, and actually, from my own experience, one of the companies that I helped advise in the past was Pret-a-Manger, and what was interesting there is that you had what was initially very entrepreneurial culture, got very big, but what they did was they allocated a certain amount of capital to a team whose job it was to take risks. So within the sort of the sort of behemoth that is Pret-a-Manger, you've got a group who are expected to fail in a number of ways, but their job is to try new things. And Pret-a-Manger decides that it's going to allocate a certain amount of capital, effectively as risk capital, in order to preserve that sort of spirit of innovation within the business. So I think different large corporations are as the panelists have said, trying to find ways of actually getting that sort of energy and innovation into their large structures. Any other questions? Yes, there's one at the back there. I think you were first.
This occurred to me. We're at Girton College, which was originally a women's college, and we have an all-male panel. And so far, all the questions have been male. I'm just wondering if, in your experience, what percentage of female entrepreneurs do you come across? And how might that number, which I suspect is quite small, grow?
Good question. I'll repeat it to say that. It was about why are there not more female entrepreneurs? or how many, the question was really how many are there? So there's loads, and Jimmy, apologised at the start, didn't you, for there not being enough on this panel. It's definitely not representative, which we're quite aware of. But I know loads. I've worked with some great female entrepreneurs. I think it's increased. My perception would be, without having any statistics to hand, it's massively increasing. So I think that's a positive thing. I don't know if you guys have got anything to add.
Yeah, so I think it's been rising much more in the last couple of years. In fact, I've joined a sort of angel group called Alma Angels, and we only back female founders. So there's definitely a positive push towards that. To answer your question, if I went back 10 years ago, I think the number was very, very little. Whereas right now, maybe it's what I'm exposed to, it is rising, but it's nowhere near where it should be.
The problem is we got to promote STEM to the women. And so in Cambridge University and Royal Academy of Engineering, we promote STEM, science and technology to women to take more part in those subjects, because the more and more they take part in their GCSE and A-level, the more and more they will come to Cambridge and Oxford, these universities, to do research, and that would turn into entrepreneurs and founders. So the back route is really need to go back there, and Cambridge and Oxford do really well in that and trying to promote that. Now coming back to seeing C-levels, entrepreneurs in women is same as seeing C-level people in women in C-levels, whether it's a CEO, CTO, any C-level executives are not many in the board when you see women. Again, all of these need to be not looking at the numbers. We need to see where the problem comes and trying to address the problem very early on, which is what Cambridge and Oxford and hopefully Girton can also do in the near future, to really promote that very early on at the student stage. Given that we have that sort of freedom to be able to promote that culture to the women society. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're approaching the end of our time. Yes, there's a... Oh.
Just a couple of comments. I think entrepreneurship is more about creating than dealing with risk. I have been in 4, and so I think the distinguishing factor is more about the ability to create something new. And Silicon Valley, where I worked for 30 years, most startups fail too, about the same number. Maybe 1 out of 20 venture capital firms do well. But about women in particular, I think the core issue is underreporting. In 1983, I started my first startup, and many of the engineers, this is a pre-internet startups, Unix System 3, Motorola, that's a little technology. The whole point of it is that most of our core, there was a woman who wrote most of the key system software. So I think that's really as important as accessibility is the fact that many women feel that there were no models to embrace. Just like Girton is a phenomenal model that has projected women and empowered women the world over. So I think, again, the issue is underreporting.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting observation. So, Robbie.
No, that's a great observation. I would agree with that as well. And going back to what Sabesan said about the STEM thing, I guess it's slightly different. This isn't necessarily about females starting businesses, but I really tried hard. We're a software company to hire female developers, and we did really well, but it was really tough. That the numbers, there weren't as many. There just weren't as many. And I think that's also really starting to change with the STEM thing. But that's also potentially a bit of an underreported piece. Anyway, sorry, we'll move on.
There's a question front here. Yes, just in the front row.
Thank you. I just wondered if, listening to you, it feels to me as if there's a tension between starting with a real-world problem or starting with the academic work and then what can we do with it. And certainly Rob's comments a couple of questions ago sort of supported that you went to Nestle with something that helped them, but they then came back with, well, we've got this problem and this problem and this one.
Yeah.
And 80% of failures, as it were, from Cambridge, is that possibly because you need to think that there's a need to start with the real world sometimes, more than we actually do.
So the question is about that linkage between ideas and real world as a sort of path to success. And I was wondering if there's any observations from the panelists on that.
You mentioned it earlier on. You described it as product market fit, I suppose, didn't you? I hear what you're saying. I think that there probably could be more done to join up industry with the academic thinking potentially, because ultimately, and other people have said it, it's about being creative, finding a problem and solving it. I think that would be one way to find entrepreneurs, definitely.
So, in order to be successful, product is one half of the equation, the team is the other half of the equation. So you've got to have the product which is a unique selling, has got to have a unique selling points, meaning got to be differentiable compared to competition. The world full of competitions. Every single company, every single product has competition. Now the other part is, often we will have the best product, best invention, best things out of this, but we may not simply have the best star performing team, which is even the hardest thing to do. Getting the right people around you as a star performing, collectively performing together to really deliver the product is the hardest thing to do. Invention is much easier. Now, once you put those two together, it's now about finding a customer. Now, finding a customer who is willing to pay in millions and millions of pounds, and once they pay, you go to scale. You go to scale to millions and billions of pounds. So that market pitch and find the right low-hanging market, really scale into, break into that market, even harder things to do. So putting all these in, which is why the 80% numbers easily come in, because none of these are easier to get it right in the order to really execute. And along the way, you've got to have a right board with the right investor who may have some experience in that sort of market, who can truly help you. And getting that sort of whole thing together is not an easy thing. It would have been, if it was easy, I'm sure that we would have many Google here, many Apple here, but unfortunately that's not the case. So thank you.
I'm conscious that we are over time now, so I should probably wrap things up. But I had one, maybe a bit cheeky, I had one final question for the panel, which is a slightly selfish question, but I sit here as bursar of Girton College. What should Girton be doing that it's not doing already to empower the entrepreneurs of the future and to encourage them? Any ideas?
Certainly, I think, I've been lucky again to be elected to be an enterprise fellow from October this year. So thanks to Girton College and the fellows here. I think we got to empower women and men in Girton College right at the undergraduate level. When they come in to start their program as an undergrad, we got to really get them to, because they're just leaving the school. As you know, I have my son, they are like little kids, right? When they leave the school, they are still depend on the parents. They're completely coming to a university. Now you've got to take them from that sort of dependent background to become more of an independent, promoting entrepreneurship, promoting science, and promoting that sort of empowering them to become an entrepreneur, become a sort of a bossy person. And I don't think we have done very well, because when they come in here, they got a hundred of activities happen in Cambridge, and as you all know, they get all sort of busy with that. So we got to focus more into that, so that when they graduate during the 3 years or 4 years or 5-year program, they can really make use of those life-changing skills to change their life for better. And I think those are the areas we got to do well at Girton, and I hope we can do that at Girton College in the coming years to come.
Yeah, we've experimented with a few definitions of entrepreneur now, but bossy person is, I think, my favourite one. The other observation is that someone once told me, so I'm not 100% sure it's true because I'm not a linguist, but you introduced me as a serial entrepreneur. The only other well-known word in the English language that has liaison with serial is killer. Someone told me that, and it's always stuck with me, so thanks for that. But no, just wrapping up, I think Girton did a fantastic job for me, actually, and I was here quite recently. I'm not trying to rub anyone's face in when I say that, by the way, but it was relatively recent. So it did a really good job for me, just in terms of rounding me out as a person and giving me the confidence, call it bossy person if you like, Sabesan, but giving me the confidence to go out into the world and do something exciting. Around the specific entrepreneurial stuff, I think, get us in. I'd love to come back, talk to the students. There's obviously not many here today, it's more about the campaign, etc. But I think getting entrepreneurs to, and it's something that I'm looking at, organising and coordinating a little bit more within the college. And then the final piece is just around funding. On a really practical level, and I dealt with it in quite a practical way. Like I said, if I hadn't had that first 25 grand, I certainly wouldn't be sat here talking about what I'm talking about now. So I think the best thing we can do in the world at large, females, males, anybody, to get people to start businesses is give them easy access to funding. And there's probably ways we could do that in college, running competitions, having a little bit of a mini fund that we say, we're going to award 20 grand a year. I'll give you it if you want, Jimmy. Well, I've just made a donation. You all heard that. that type of thing I think to actually do. that would be really wonderful.
Yes, I think, just backing what Rob said, I think, and going back a little bit before Rob's time here, I think if we'd had access to more entrepreneurs back in the day where we had talks and stuff, whether it's ex-alumni or even within our network, would have really added a lot to it. I think just reflecting on, I've got 2 young girls, 10 and sadly 13 now, which is interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's all about role modeling, and just what myself and obviously my wife, and obviously our family and friends around that, how we can sort of demonstrate to them, just all the values that we're looking at before in that sort of state. And yeah, I just think what I actually benefit from right now, even I'm forever 21 in my heart, but I'm 48 now. But I have a couple of mentors to this day that still sort of talk me through a providing strong challenge and all the rest of that. And I think that's key. And if that could start at an early age, just giving access to that. And the funding is great. I think in the funding, one thing I found coming, being an overseas student when I came here was, and it seems to have changed more now in the UK, is it was completely unacceptable to fail when I first came in the 90s, whereas it's much more acceptable. And I think the American psyche and approach to this is much more accepting and saying actually, in fact, a lot of VCs who have met said that if you haven't failed even once or twice, we're not going to back you. You need to have been through that cycle. And I know it sounds odd, but it's important that the learnings from failure are much more salient than what I've had through my successes.
Thank you very much to our panel. There's some exciting things to take forward there. And thank you for your questions, which have been very, very interesting. So I'm very grateful to Sabesan, to Rob, to Amar for joining us today, and maybe if we join a round of applause to thank you.
And thank you for your very good